Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're ready. And good evening to everyone. I'm Steve Willis. I'm one of the founders of Hope Sheds Light. On behalf of my partners, co-founders, Arvo Prima and Ron Rosetto, I welcome you to our family support meeting tonight. It's really a joy to see everybody, particularly so close to the holidays. Thank you. And we welcome all of you who are viewing this through Facebook. We appreciate you as well. Hope Sheds Light is a nonprofit. We started about 4.5 years ago. Our mission is to raise awareness and educate individuals, families, and the community about the impact of addiction by having the courage to share our personal experiences and offer strength and wisdom and hope and resources that lead to positive community change and long-term recovery. Our vision is for our efforts to remove the fear and stigma that surrounds this disease of addiction through a loving, recovery-driven, safe, and trusting, hopeful environment that brings wellness to the community and allows families to have the courage to heal and recover. Addiction is a family disease. We know that. It means the whole family becomes affected, which in turn means that each member needs to become well. Last year, we started this Finding Hope for Life family support group to help families do just that. It meets the second and fourth Tuesday of each month in the beautiful Holy Cross Lutheran Church here in Toms River. This meeting is offered to anyone affected by addiction and to all who are concerned that it might impact their families. We offer prevention strategies and tools to aid in recovery. We want everyone to know that you're not alone and that a loving, supportive, effective support system exists right here. Our hope is by us sharing with you and you with us, you'll find the courage to change the way you look and feel about addiction and in turn become healthy. The first part of this meeting is an educational piece. We have talented colleagues, and we appreciate them. They come to discuss topics that relate to prevention, treatment, and recovery. That lasts about 45 minutes or so. During the second part of our meeting, we break out into groups to discuss what we've heard and how addiction and substance misuse affects our lives today. And what's really important is that we discuss what we can do to take care of ourselves and therefore become healthier. We will offer an educated plan for your family that's based in wisdom, strength, and love. And following our groups, we'll just come back together for about 5 or 10 minutes to share takeaways from tonight's fellowship. So we are excited to see you each and every time you come, and we welcome everyone, and we hope our Facebook friends will join us at one of our upcoming meetings. With that, let me ask Lindsay Quintez to introduce our speaker for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. We have a special speaking guest tonight. We have Tina Marie, I don't want to mess it up, so I'm going to read it, Venicofsky. Tina Marie has been, I'm sorry, did I?
Awesome. No,
okay, good. I pronounced it right. Tina Marie has been working in the field since 1993. She has provided many trainings, consultations. She is a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. She has a private practice. She also has experience working in medicinal intervention, Medicaid-assisted treatments, which I'm sure that we're going to hear more about Tina Marie's experience. Further ado, help me welcome Tina Marie.
Thank you so much for inviting me here this evening, and first I want to thank Doris Sheds Light, and she's a wonderful person. She's got a lot of great resources. She's an international marketer for a chain of wonderful treatment facilities, and I just want to give some credit to her because she linked me with this facility. So as we approach the holidays, there's a lot of stress, and especially for families who have a loved one struggling with addiction, there's a lot of pressure around the holidays. You know, it seems like when I talk to my clients in various groups and individual sessions, I always pick up on this pressure and this stress around the holidays. And it's not just about the connecting, but it's the whole commercial part of the holidays, to shop and buy gifts and, the holiday spirit. But there's also, not just for the clients, because we talk to the clients and we talk to them about getting through the holidays, but I also believe for the families, it's also very stressful getting through the holidays. And depending on where your loved one is with addiction and in recovery, that can mean the world of difference in terms of getting through the holiday. So when you have a loved one who's sick, no matter what the illness is, and whether it's addiction, cancer, or heart disease, and I know tonight we're here to talk about addiction, but no matter what the illness is, it always puts a lot of extra stress around the holidays. Recently I came across a website that talked about stress around the holidays, and it was interesting because the website emphasized that it appears that it's more stressful for women than men. And I'm not so quite sure that I agree with that, because I just believe that gender differences, I think women show it in different ways, but I think for men as well, it's also very stressful. Okay, bear with me here. Okay. So acknowledging the struggle is the first battle. Acknowledging is very important. Being honest with yourself and just being honest about, hey, listen, I'm struggling through this, I believe is the first big step to getting through the holiday. And because we're not alone with this struggle, we're never alone. And as we go through tonight's presentation, I am going to be talking about I'm going to throw out a lot of information to you. I'm hoping some of this information will provide some skills in talking about from acceptance to addiction as a family disease, whether or not we accept addiction as a family disease, or do we still look at it as a moral issue and how that impacts us, self-forgiveness, difference between guilt and shame, and getting connected and resources. So as we go through the holiday, one of the first things I believe is very important is to find your comfort level. And finding your comfort level may mean looking outside of traditions, thinking a little bit outside of the box. Again, when we talk about the whole commercial part of maybe the ways that we've been taught by our families. And what I'm saying is here to think a little bit outside the box and find what your comfort level is, because you may not feel up to doing all the traditions. You may set new traditions. And I believe giving yourself a break through the holiday is very important. Sometimes going to big gatherings and having a lot of family there can be stressful and overwhelming. So I always believe to think a little bit outside the box. We teach our clients to protect their recovery through the holidays. We teach them to take breaks. We teach them to make a meeting if you need to in the middle of a gathering, whatever you have to do to keep yourself safe. And so this really parallels that, because it's important for families too to protect yourself through the holidays and to get support and to give yourself a break. I keep going the wrong way, I apologize. Okay, so acceptance. I want to talk a little bit about acceptance, because I believe that acceptance is a very big piece of doing more than just getting through the holidays. And this is by Oxford Dictionaries, but what I want us to really pay attention to is belief in, trust in, faith in, confidence in, credence in, willingness to tolerate a difficult or unpleasant situation. That's the definition of acceptance. So there's a lot of confusion about acceptance. Whenever I introduce the idea of acceptance to my families, I often get feedback about that I don't, if I accept, this means I'm giving up hope. And that's not necessarily true. That's not what acceptance is. Acceptance is, I'm accepting that my loved one is struggling with a disease, an addiction. And I'm also accepting that I need to let go a little bit and accept it is what it is. It's a disease. And by acknowledging the fact that they have a disease, I can let go a little bit and realize that I'm not always in control of what's happening with their disease. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people in general struggle with, is accepting addiction as a disease. So when I accept that my loved one has a disease, and I'm able to let go a little bit of that control, I find hope that they're going to get better in their own time, that I'm not in control of what that looks like. What I am in control of is my reaction and my response to what happens with that loved one who is sick with the addiction. So everyone has a journey, and acceptance is allowing the loved one to walk one's own journey. And I find for parents especially, this is really difficult. I think as a parent, we always feel like we're in control, and to a certain extent with certain things we may be, but with a lot of things we may not be. And I believe when a child develops an addiction, that letting go part for a parent is very difficult to do. And again, it's not that we're giving up hope. It's more of just that we're going to allow that person to take their own path. We're going to impact it as much as we can, but we're also going to be more mindful of our reaction to what's happening, our response to what's happening. So acceptance is the answer. In the big book, we teach this to clients suffering with addiction. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing. I'm going to read this, but we can replace some of these words to be more applicable to you, and I'm going to do that a second time around. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what it needs to be changed, as on what needs to be changed in me and in my attitudes. This is by Alcoholics Anonymous. So if we replace, nothing, absolutely nothing happens in whoever your higher power is, whatever you're connected to. God, the universe, the Lord, however you want to phrase that. Until I could accept my child's addiction, my loved one's addiction, my significant other's addiction, I could have no peace or serenity. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. Me and my attitudes is the response to your loved one's addiction. That's what becomes important. How I respond to it. Through the years, what I have found is that it's usually family members who get really worn down when they have a loved one who's using. It's usually family members who get sick for that. While your loved one's out there doing whatever they're doing, the family members left home worrying, chasing, trying to change, trying to figure out how am I going to resolve this? How am I going to make this better? How am I going to get my daughter, my son to stop? And that does take a big toll on the individual's health. So letting go is the cornerstone of acceptance. Does not mean I love my family member less. A few years back, I had worked for Monmouth Medical Center, and I was a co-occurring disorder specialist. And part of what I did there was to provide resources for treatment for families, for different agencies, individuals looking for treatment. And many times I would get calls from family members on what to do, which direction should I take. And as a parent, I would never tell you what to do. I don't think anybody should really tell you what to do. I may, if I see that you're heading down a path that's going to cause more harm, bring it to your attention. But as a parent, as a loved one, with a family member who's struggling with addiction, these decisions are yours to make. Finding what you're comfortable with is your decision to make. And so I had one parent call me, and I'll never forget this phone call because she was so appreciative that I didn't yell at her on the phone. I mean, she literally said to me, thank you so much for listening to me. I've had so many people yell at me about what to do. I felt so desperate. She's like, I didn't really know where to reach out to. And that happens a lot because people get frustrated, and that's understandable. But when you start to accept and take a step back and let go a little bit, it does not mean that our love has changed for that family member who's struggling. Okay, we're just responding to it a little bit differently. Okay, so where am I with accepting my loved one's addiction? Do I look at addiction as a disease, or do I look at it as a moral issue? And I think this is very important to touch on, because I do believe where people struggle in general is looking at addiction as a moral issue. So I want to just talk a little bit about that. Okay. We go going the long way again. Okay. So addiction as a family disease. It impacts, okay, addiction as a family disease. Impacts all family members just like any other illness, such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, right? When there's one person in the household who's sick, everyone's impacted, whether it's diabetes and you have to shop differently and buy different food, or heart disease, you're going to different medical appointments, helping your loved one. When someone's sick in the family, it impacts the entire household. So what does this mean? Individual experiences but share common symptoms. The difference with addiction, though, there's a tendency to focus on the destruction, the negative consequences, the loss, the separation, again, like it's a moral issue. Individual experiences, but you're not alone, never alone, but may feel alone. And a little bit later, I'm going to talk about the difference between being connected, feeling connected, and feeling or being alone. So characteristics of addiction as a disease. And this I wanted to just rush through this. I just wanted to give you some of this because, again, I know people struggle with looking at addiction as a disease, a brain disease. I do have some, in just a few minutes, we're going to look at some slides of the brain that I think are really powerful to say. My families, when they struggle with looking at addiction as a disease, once they see usually the slides of the brain, it's like an eye-opener, like, wow, that's really going on inside that individual. So these are the characteristics. It's primary, it can be described. It's predictable, progressive, chronic, permanent, treatable, not curable in the sense that, treatable, not curable in the sense that it's once somebody is diagnosed, it's like a cucumber that becomes pickled. We can't convert it back. Once someone is diagnosed, it's something that they live with throughout their life. Potentially fatal if not addressed. So, primary. This means there's no other underlying disorder or diagnosis, okay? The person's diagnosed based on their symptoms, and not because, for example, they have another medical condition where they think that's triggering it. It's primary. It's diagnosed on its own. And this is very difficult to do, by the way. A lot of professionals believe that in order to truly diagnose a true mental health issue, if you have someone who's struggling with mental health and addiction, you need that person to be sober for 6 months to truly know what mental health symptoms are present because it takes time for the drugs to come out of the system. It takes time for the brain to adjust to that, and it takes time to really truly see what the individual is experiencing. The difficult part of that, and the catch-22 to that, is asking an addict to be uncomfortable for 6 months is a long time. It really is. So that's why more and more now you see treatment facilities will prescribe different medications on a short-term basis to get the individual through that period until they adjust to recovery. And then they can truly see what symptoms exist. So it can be described. Obsessive thoughts lead to compulsive behavior, which leads to a physical addiction. When we talk about obsessive thoughts and compulsive behavior, we're not talking about a fleeting thought. We're talking about a persistent thoughts that invade the individual's memory 24 hours a day, their mind 24 hours a day. That's all they're focused on. That's all they can think about is getting their next fix. And that's what they go through. Predictable and progressive. Addiction brings the addict to similar mindsets and behavior. There is a predictable pattern. The addict picks up and consequences occur. So, for example, I had an individual years ago who was in recovery for 20 years. And when this individual relapsed, it was like as if he had never stopped. It started with a thought running into somebody, and next thing he knew, he wasn't going to meetings, was not calling his sponsor. Holiday came up, started with a drink of alcohol, which was never his drug of choice, and that led to cocaine, and that led to a full-blown relapse and back into inpatient treatment. After having 20 solid years of recovery where he was married, he had kids, beautiful home, cars, business, the whole 9 yards. So it does happen. Progressive. If unaddressed, consequences become worse. Recovering addicts report picking up where they left off with their last run. So when this individual, when he picked up, what he described was it felt like he had never really stopped. And this is where individuals get themselves into trouble with overdoses, because they go back out there, and not really intending to go back out there, by the way, but what happens is they're triggered, they go back out there thinking, okay, I can handle all this because this is what I was doing before. And when they relapse, because they haven't had anything in a long time, it's too much for their system and they wind up overdosing, and that's very common. Chronic and permanent, 24 hours a day. When an addict feels better, they often mistaken that for getting better. So going back to that individual who relapsed, one of his thought processes before he relapsed was, I have 20 years in recovery. I feel better. I have 20 solid years. Why do I need to keep going to meetings? Maybe I'm past this. Maybe I'm done with this. Maybe I'm cured. And that's a very common thing. How many people are prescribed medications, right? Antibiotics, let's take, for example. They start an antibiotic, a few days in, you start to feel better. Oh, I don't really need to finish this, right? I mean, that's a very common thing to do. When we start to feel better, we automatically think we are better. And then we lose touch with what's getting us better. So for that individual, the meetings, the sponsor, all the work that he did, he lost touch with that because he was feeling better, and he mistaken that for actually being better. Permanent is a lifelong process of recovery. An addict in recovery needs the same program 10, 20, 30 years because the addiction does not leave. A cucumber that becomes pickled. So again, once that individual steps over the line into addiction, there is no going back. And I can't tell you how many times I get phone calls from parents, oh, if I send them or her away for 30 days, or I'm going to send my loved one away, I'm going to send my daughter or my son away to campus, and it's going to be far from here, and my son will be just fine. No, because on campus he's going to find drugs also. because it's all over, it's accessible. Those aren't, you know, it seems like it's a quick fix, like, oh, I'll send my loved one away, get them out of the environment. That's part of the battle, but that's not the entire battle. Because when it comes to addiction, there's the emotional, spiritual, and psychological piece. Treatable, not curable. So we can put it into remission like other diseases, but once the person struggling with addiction moves away from their program, they often relapse. That's what I have found through the years. So they always need something. And if the loved one starts out, let's say the individual starts out with 6 meetings a week, will they always need 6 meetings a week? I can't say that. But I know this, they'll always need something from their program so that they can stay in recovery. Just like other diseases, unfortunately, people do die from it. Relapse is a part of recovery, not a necessary part. There are some people who do go into recovery. They go into rehab once. For whatever reason, they get it, they come out, and they stay in recovery. It's more rare, but it does happen. Okay, so these are pictures of the brain. And this is by NIDA. NIDA does it, if you look up NIDA on the website, they do a lot of, they've done a lot of studying with addiction as a brain disease, and you'll find a lot of photographs and PET scans of the brain. And so what you see on the left is someone who's not addicted. What they refer to as a normal healthy brain, for lack of better terminology, I think they refer to that, someone who's never used substances versus somebody who has. And what you're seeing is on the left side, there's a lot of red, which means blood flow, brain activity. On the right, you see a lot less. And that's because the chemicals impact the brain. Here you see a 20-year-old female. On the left side, female who has healthy control, a healthy level, doesn't have any diagnosed addiction. And on the right, you have somebody who's alcohol dependent, who's been diagnosed with alcohol addiction. And what you can see is on the left, you see a lot of different colors. You could see pink, you could see a little bit of yellow, orange. On the right side, you see a lot less activity and a lot less color. And again, that's because of the addiction and how it impacts the brain. So this is what your loved ones battle when they're in recovery. It's more than just the psychological piece, the spiritual piece, but they're also battling the physical piece. Oh, sorry. Okay, so this is your brain after drugs. So on top, you have, again, someone who doesn't use. The middle, you have someone who uses cocaine. It's a cocaine abuser, and it's after 10 days. And then on the bottom, you have a cocaine abuser after 100 days. Okay, so this is to show you the impact over time. When your loved one stops using, 10 days over 3 months. And as you can see, the top row who does not use, again, there's a lot of color. You see a lot of brain activity. In the middle row, after 10 days, you see very little color, very little activity. 100 days. You see more activity, but it's still not where it really should be. Okay? So this is to show you that recovery is a process. Addiction does impact the brain. That's why they're calling it a brain disease. It's more than just a moral issue, although I know stuff happens, and we tend to focus on the moral aspect of it because it's painful when our loved one's out there using and doing different things. But this is to show you how much it really does impact the brain and what people who are suffering with addiction, what they have to battle, what they have to face when they're in recovery. This last slide, I think, is very powerful. It shows you a structure in the brain called the amygdala. It's a little almond structure that's associated with cravings, urges, and feelings. Okay, and what they found was they took someone in recovery, and this individual watched a video, a nature video first. A nature video would not necessarily trigger an addict. unless they were used to getting high, you know, maybe out in the woods and stuff like that. But outside of that, it wouldn't traditionally trigger someone. So this individual watched the nature video, nothing happened. When the same individual watched a cocaine video, a video that had drug paraphernalia, watching people get high, the amygdala lit up, and the person started to crave, get urges, and feelings like they wanted to get high. So what this shows, going back to my client who relapsed after 20 years, what this shows is that even a really good program in recovery and feel that they have solid time, stuff happens. There's uncontrollable things by chance that happen. They may run into someone at the store who they have not seen in 10, 15, 20 years. And when that happens, it triggers stuff inside the individual. And that individual may not even be aware that they're being triggered. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is letting go of perfectionism. When we feel alone, this is because we are not truly connected. Being connected means I can share my most inner thoughts without fear or reservation of judgment. We allow ourselves to be vulnerable. What stops us from being connected? Usually fear, embarrassment, guilt, shame, thoughts that we have to always put on a front and be perfect. There's a video I want to pull up. Can I do that? Do we have internet? We do. There's a little video I want to show you. Brene Brown is really good with this, and she talks about being wholehearted. She talks about getting in touch with your inner self and letting that show. Not hiding and being afraid to let people see who you are. And so when struggling, when you have a family member who's struggling with addiction, often family members feel they have to put on a front, that they have to hide it, that they have to keep it a secret. And I believe that just enhances the pain of what you're going through, because it keeps people disconnected rather than connecting to the support that they need. Do you need help with that, or? So I'd like to show you a little video from Brene Brown, just as soon as we can pull it up.
Is it in your PowerPoint?
That's like I could copy and paste that and just go into it. So can you get onto the internet, or?
We're on the internet.
We are, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So is this on the right, or where's the link? Is that you or me? This is the link here.
Mm-hmm.
I can even just type it in. Do you want me to? Can you post the internet, and then I'll just.
Lindsay, I'm told you have to open up the email. You got it.
You have it? Yes, that's the first one, no, second one. Oh, with the picture of Oprah. Can you click on the link? Oh, you did? You're not coming up?
It's just the internet's slow. Sorry, folks. The internet's
Sorry.
very slow.
We're experiencing technical difficulties.
A lot of.
So Brene Brown has done a lot of research with guilt and shame, perfectionism, letting go. Didn't come up.
Not letting us in.
Can I come over there and do it for 1 second?
I
Sorry about the advertisement. This is just a few minutes.
One of the things that I love in, I think it's the first book, The Gifts of Imperfection, you talk about being a wholehearted person. Now, my definition of spirituality is living an open-hearted life. So open-hearted, wholehearted. What does it mean to be a wholehearted person? You have actually, a list of 10 different qualities that wholehearted people have in common. And so cultivating authenticity, letting go of what people think. That's the first one. Let's talk about that.
It's so hard. I thought doing this research, I thought going into it, there are authentic people and inauthentic people.
Mm-hmm.
I did not find any evidence of that at all. What I found is authenticity is a practice, and you choose it every day, sometimes every hour of every day. And it's a practice. It's not, I just wake up and, hey, I'm authentic. It's that when you walk into a meeting, you have to make the choice. Am I going to show up and let myself be seen? Am I going to raise my hand and say, wow, y'all look super excited. I don't know what in the hell you're talking about. I'm so lost. That's a choice.
Yes,
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And make that authentic choice, you gotta let go
Of the fakeroo, I say.
Yeah.
I call it the fakeroo. But you know what? I have found, I consider myself to be an authentic person, but when I am inauthentic is when I've allowed myself to be around people who were not, and then I have to fake it to be with them.
Oh, for sure, it's contagious.
Yes. So they're faking it,
Yeah.
and you're in that situation when you do that, that kind of, you're laughing at jokes that aren't funny, you're pretending to be comfortable when you're not, and lose your own authenticity.
Yeah, and I do it.
So letting go of what people think. Okay, cultivating self-compassion, letting go of perfectionism, because there is no such thing.
No, first of all, that this is what led, these 10 guideposts that emerged from the research is
Yes.
what led to the breakdown.
Yes.
Like, this did not make me happy.
Because you were like 2 out of the 10.
I was 2 out of the 10, and I was cheating.
And you're writing the book.
Right. And so I had to put the data away. I didn't write the book until I was in therapy for 1.5 years.
Wow.
And I went to a therapist with an Excel spreadsheet that said, here are the things that I need more of. I've got 6 weeks. Go.
Fix me.
Fix me. She said, yeah. But no, so here's what I learned about
I love that you went to a therapist that sees therapists.
Yeah.
And that you started out by saying, look, I just want to be fixed. I don't want to talk about that mothered stuff and all that.
No,
the
no
past.
childhood BS.
No childhood BS. Let's just get to it.
Tips and techniques, baby. Bullet points. Bullet point me. Save me.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah, no.
Wow.
So, perfectionism, what emerged for me in the data was that perfectionism is not about striving for excellence or healthy striving, which I'm for.
Yeah.
It's a cognitive behavioral process, a way of thinking and feeling that says this: if I look perfect, do it perfect, work perfect, and live perfect, I can avoid or minimize shame, blame, and judgment.
You know what I thought when I was reading this? I had another aha.
Two people.
This was my other aha. That perfectionism, I never gotten this before until I read this, that perfectionism is the ultimate fear. That the people who are walking around as perfectionists, who have to have everything so, that they are ultimately afraid that the world is going to see them for who they really are, and they won't marry. Right?
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fear.
Because it's very different than trying to be excellent and working hard and doing your best. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I call perfectionism the 20-ton shield. We carry it around thinking it's going to protect us from being hurt, but it protects us from being seen.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know people who are, and I actually, you're striving for a world that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I can see right through it.
God, it's so slippery. I'm like a recovering perfectionist. But
Really?
It's like one day at a time. Yeah, because like if I'm feeling...
How did it show up for you?
Okay, I'm going to cut this here.
Academically, in my work.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'll just put this back on the presentation. Okay, so, did I lose it? Sorry. Okay, so, we all tend to do this. We all tend to put on different faces. And when we have a loved one suspected, and it doesn't allow us to get the help and support that we need. So learning to be vulnerable is important, of course, with the right people, and letting go of secrets is just as important. A lot of people struggle with this, with letting go of secrets. Somehow I think sometimes people feel, well, gee, if I keep this a secret, no one's going to think anything of me and everything will just somehow be okay. And it's not, because again, it keeps us disconnected. Letting go of secrets unlocks a lot of potential. When we connect with people, when we let go of the secrets, and we're able to show who we are and just talk about what we need to, is when things change. And it's not just for the addict, it's for the family as well. So the next topic I want to talk about is the guilt and shame. Brene Brown mentioned the guilt and shame. Guilt is very different from shame. Guilt says, I feel remorse over this. I am human, I made a mistake, I can heal from this. Guilt is healthier. It's normal to have some guilt. We do something and we feel we made a mistake, we feel guilt over it, and we say, okay, next time I'm going to try and do a better job with this. So, but shame is a lot different. Shame is, and I find parents struggle with this a lot. Shame is, this is my fault. I'm a bad parent. Somehow I take blame for this. And I'm never going to be able to get out of the grips of this, because we attach it to who we are as people. And I find that parents do struggle with this. I'll never forget years ago when myself and a few of my family members, we got together and we approached a relative who was struggling with a child who had addiction, but she didn't want to face it. And it was her son. And when myself and a few of the relatives, we got together, we decided we were going to do an intervention. We sat with her, we brought it to her attention. And her initial reaction was, she sat there and she cried and she said to us, but I'm not a bad parent. So in her mind, by acknowledging that her child had an addiction, this equaled, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad parent, somehow I've done something wrong. And that's what shame is, okay? Whereas guilt would be, okay, yeah, I've made mistakes, but I need to deal with this, and I need to help my loved one the best way that I can. So they're quite different, and shame will often keep people in that cycle of pain and suffering. So self-forgiveness is very important. And we teach this to our clients, but it's equally as important to our families. Do I see myself as a human being worthy of forgiveness, or do I continually rehash my mistakes, attaching to myself, my self-worth as a person? Do I constantly beat myself up for mistakes I've made? Or am I able to get past it? Am I able to process it, get past it, and do something about it, and improve my actions in the future? There is always a tendency to beat ourselves up. I mean, just take the media, for example. When you put on the news, I mean, it's focused mostly on everything negative in the world, and if there's something positive, it's a 30-second blurb and that's it, it's gone, and the rest is negative. So we have a tendency to gravitate towards that. I first need to let go of the things I am not in control of, and again it goes back to that acceptance, and work on what I can control, me, myself, and my attitude, my judgments, how I see things, how I respond to things, how much I allow myself to be vulnerable. Do I have empathy for myself? Empathy for ourselves is very, very important. It allows ourselves to forgive ourselves. How do I get through this difficult time? I had someone approach me, a colleague approached me, and she said she was in therapy. She had just found out one of her kids had an addiction, and at the same time she was going through a divorce. And she said to me she was seeing a therapist, and the therapist said to her, when she asked the therapist, how am I going to get through this? The therapist said to her, by going through it. And I said to her, well, there's just one thing I want to add to that. Yes, by going through it, but not alone. Getting connected, feeling supported is one of the most important things to get through. Whether it's addiction, whether it's the holidays, whether it's living with your family member who's struggling, it's feeling supported and feeling connected, and there is a difference. Can we never be or feel alone? There is definitely a difference. I think we're running out of time, so I'm not going to get into the other video, but there's another video by Brene Brown, and she talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is when we connect with someone, when we really feel like that individual hears us, feels our pain. Sympathy is when someone responds to you, they acknowledge you, but you kind of feel like, I don't know if they quite got what I just said. Okay? It may not always be a response that we want to hear. Okay? Sometimes it's not necessarily a response that we want to hear. It may be what we need to hear at that point, at that time. So, true connection is not being rescued. Not always hearing what we want to hear, but hearing what we need to hear at that moment. Having someone tell us what to do, make our decisions, or resolve the situation. That is not what true connection is about. True connection is going through with the individual so one does not feel alone, so the individual knows one is never alone. You can be alone but never really feel alone. There are people who are in crowds of people, and they say, all right, but I still feel alone. I have clients tell me, I went to the meetings, but I still feel alone. I don't feel connected. Well, did you share at the meeting? Did you talk to anybody? Did you connect with anyone? No. Technically, you are still alone because you haven't really connected to anyone in the room. It's the same concept. Okay, when we truly connect with people, when people are genuine with each other, truly listen to each other, we feel connected, and then we're not alone. So this true connection allows us to feel our feelings, allows us to trust, to heal, and move forward. And this is where hope lies. Okay, this is where hope lives. Okay, when we're able to connect with people, when we're able to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to trust, and be genuine with ourselves and with other people. And I truly believe it does start with oneself. When we are able to be truthful with ourselves, people. spirituality, I believe, is one of the biggest sources of connection. And I know a lot of my clients and families struggle with this, especially when someone's been diagnosed with an illness. It's like, why me? Why my child? Why my loved one? Spirituality, in simplest terms, is a connection to something outside myself. And I have some clients who say, well, I find that my spiritual connection is the experience I share with other people in the rooms, in the 12-step meetings. I have other clients say to me that they have favorite spots they like to go to, like either someplace in the mountains, the beach, a specific church, where they feel they can connect, and they feel like they're connecting to something outside themselves. So there is no, like, I can't tell you what that's going to be for you, but developing that spiritual connection is very important. There are many ways to be connected, and again, physically to a church, synagogue. I have a Native American Indian who told me he has a longhouse up in upstate New York where he experiences that. Groups, meetings. These are resources for treatment, for families to get support, to be connected. There's a lot of different resources out there. I mean, besides your traditional Naranon, Al-Anon, there's meetings online that you can join, where you can connect to other people, other parents who are also struggling, other families who are struggling. There's also a national parent helpline, which I think is really nice because it's a 24-hour helpline where you can call and talk to someone and get support. And of course, there's all different kinds of treatment facilities have programs for families. And what I recommend is to start small. Start with someone like on an individual level, either a private therapist, a counselor, before graduating to bigger things, because I believe people need to do that in stages and in steps to get connected. And it's intimidating to walk into a room full of people where you don't know anybody at all, and then expect to sit there and allow yourself to be vulnerable, trust, and open up your heart and share everything. I mean, that comes in time, but I do believe starting on an individual level is the best way to go. I just want to thank everyone tonight for allowing me this opportunity. When you break out into your small group, I just want to encourage you to process some of the concepts, because we covered a lot of things between acceptance, self-forgiveness, being vulnerable, being authentic. And the last thing I just wanted to say is that I do work locally. I have a private practice in Toms River. It's off of Route 37 East, going towards like the north part of 37 in the Toms River Professional Center. And I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very, very much for joining us tonight and for sharing your very valuable knowledge. This is all very, very helpful. And it aligns with exactly what we do with As Hope Sheds Light. We're here to let you know that you're not alone. And that goes for everybody out there in this room and on Facebook. We also have access to some Al-Anon meetings as well. In case people want to expand their resources other than these meetings, we have meeting lists for Al-Anon throughout New Jersey. So if you're interested, we have them right up here. And once again, I just want to thank Tina Marie and everyone for coming out tonight. So let me just end the stream.